I'm Sarah Martinez. I'm 29, and I've been wearing a blue Walmart vest for 7 years. Tonight, at my grandmother's 80th birthday celebration at the Oak Ridge Country Club, I sat at the kids' table while my cousins discussed their real careers at the adult section. Then my cousin Jessica turned to me with that perfectly practiced smile and said, "Still at Walmart, Sarah? What's it been now? Forever?" The laughter that followed felt like glass breaking in my chest. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, surrounded by white tablecloths and crystal glasses, wearing the one decent dress I owned, a navy blue number I'd bought on clearance 3 months ago. Around me, the Martinez family reunion buzzed with the kind of energy that comes from people who've never had to choose between paying rent and buying groceries. My grandmother, Elena Martinez, sat at the head table like a queen holding court, her silver hair perfectly set, her smile warm but distant when it landed on me. I'd driven here straight from my evening shift, still smelling faintly of the cleaning supplies we used in aisle 12. My hands, despite the scrubbing, still carried the ghost of price stickers and cardboard boxes. But Jessica wore a crisp white blazer that probably cost more than I made in 2 weeks. Her nails were perfect, her laugh was rehearsed, and her condescension was as polished as the silverware. 7 years, I said quietly, my voice barely cutting through the dinner conversation. 7 years at Walmart. Wow, she continued, swirling her wine like she was performing for an audience. I mean, it's great that you're consistent, but don't you want more? I just got promoted to senior marketing coordinator at Brennan & Associates. The pay is incredible, the benefits are amazing, and the networking opportunities. She gestured vaguely, as if the rest was too obvious to explain. My Uncle Robert, Jessica's father, leaned back in his chair with the satisfaction of a man whose daughter had just validated his parenting. "Jessica's always been ambitious," he said, loud enough for half the table to hear. "Even in college, she knew exactly what she wanted. That's the difference between dreamers and achievers." The comment hung in the air like smoke. I felt every eye at our section of the table turn toward me, some curious, some pitying, some simply uncomfortable with the tension. My cousin Miguel, Jessica's younger brother, shifted in his seat and suddenly became very interested in his mashed potatoes. My Aunt Carmen cleared her throat softly, the way people do when they want to change the subject but don't know how. But Jessica wasn't done. She never was. "I mean, don't get me wrong," she said, her voice dripping with the kind of fake concern that feels worse than outright cruelty. "Retail is important. Someone has to do those jobs. But you're smart, Sarah. You graduated from state with good grades. What happened? Did you just give up?" The question hit me like a physical blow. What happened? What happened was that my mother got sick during my senior year of college, and the medical bills ate through our savings like fire through paper. What happened was that I took a temporary job at Walmart to help pay for her chemotherapy treatments, and never left because someone had to keep the lights on. What happened was that dreams became luxuries I couldn't afford. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I said I like my job. Jessica's eyebrows shot up like I'd just claimed the earth was flat. "You like stocking shelves?" "I like helping people," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I like solving problems. I like making sure families can find what they need at prices they can afford." The table fell silent for a moment. Then Jessica laughed. Not a cruel laugh exactly, but the kind of laugh you give a child who's just said something adorable and naive. "That's sweet," she said. "Really sweet. But come on, Sarah, you can't tell me you want to spend the rest of your life in retail. What's your plan? Management? District manager? Are you going to work at Walmart forever?" The question echoed in my head like a bell tolling. Forever. The word carried weight, judgment, finality. It suggested that I was stuck, that I was settling, that I was somehow less than the people around this table because I wore a name tag instead of a business card. I started to speak, but the words caught in my throat. Because the truth was complicated. The truth was that I'd been planning something for months. something that kept me awake at night with excitement and terror in equal measure. But it was still fragile, still forming, still too precious to share with people who would dissect it like a biology class frog. "The thing is," Jessica continued, clearly interpreting my silence as confirmation of her assumptions, "retail doesn't really grow you, you know? It's not building toward anything, it's just maintaining, and you're too young to just maintain." My grandmother's voice cut through the conversation like a knife through butter. "Jessica, Mija, that's enough." Elena Martinez had been quiet through most of the dinner, but when she spoke, everyone listened. She'd raised 6 children through the Depression, built a small grocery store into a local institution, and buried a husband while keeping her family together. Her word was law, even at 80. "Abuela," Jessica said, her voice immediately softer, more deferential. "You were just being unkind," my grandmother said simply. "Sarah works hard. She takes care of her family. That matters more than your fancy job titles." Jessica's cheeks flushed pink, but she nodded and mumbled an apology that felt more like obligation than remorse. The conversation shifted to safer topics. Miguel's new apartment, my aunt's garden, the weather. But I remained frozen in that moment, replaying Jessica's words over and over. "Working at Walmart forever. My TD Jayla." The phrase felt like a brand, hot and permanent. Because that's how they all saw me, wasn't it? Sarah, the family disappointment. Sarah, who never quite figured it out. Sarah, who was stuck while everyone else was climbing. I excused myself from the table and walked to the bathroom, my heels clicking against the marble floor of the country club. In the mirror, I stared at my reflection. Tired eyes, discount dress, the faint outline of my name tag still visible on my chest, even though I'd taken it off hours ago. For a moment, I saw what Jessica saw, a woman going nowhere, trapped in a life too small for her ambitions. But then I thought about the notebook hidden in my bedroom, filled with months of research, calculations, and dreams. I thought about the conversations I'd had with suppliers, the locations I'd scouted on my days off, the business plan I'd been refining every night after work. I thought about the loan applications sitting on my kitchen table, waiting for my signature. Jessica was wrong about one thing. I wasn't stuck at Walmart forever. I was learning. Every shift taught me something new about inventory management, customer service, logistics, and retail operations. Every difficult customer showed me how to stay calm under pressure. Every busy holiday season trained me to think fast and solve problems on the fly. I wasn't just working at Walmart, I was studying it. And soon, very soon, I was going to use everything I'd learned to build something of my own. But not tonight. Tonight, I would smile and nod and let Jessica believe she'd won. Because the best revenge isn't anger, it's success. And mine was coming sooner than any of them could imagine. I straightened my shoulders, checked my lipstick, and walked back to the table. The evening continued around me, but I was no longer really there. In my mind, I was already somewhere else, building something bigger than their small opinions could contain. Working at Walmart forever? Not quite, Jessica. Not quite. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The drive home from the country club felt longer than usual, my grandmother's words echoing in my head alongside Jessica's cutting remarks. I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment complex. Sunset Gardens, though there was no garden and no sunset view, just cracked asphalt and a broken streetlight that had been flickering for 3 months. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as memories I'd tried to bury came flooding back. This wasn't the first time I'd been dismissed by my own family. It was just the most public. I remembered being 17, sitting in my high school guidance counselor's office, clutching a letter of acceptance to Arizona State University. I'd earned a partial scholarship for academic achievement, and I was so proud I could barely contain myself. When I got home, I burst through the front door of our small house in Phoenix, waving the letter like a victory flag. "Mom, Dad, I got in. I got the scholarship." My mother, Maria, was in the kitchen making dinner, her nurse scrubs still on from her double shift at Phoenix General. She looked up from chopping onions, her face lighting up with genuine joy. "Mija, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you. But my father, Carlos, barely glanced up from his newspaper. How much is the scholarship for? 70% of tuition, I said, my excitement dimming slightly at his tone. And the other 30%? We'll figure it out. I can work, get student loans. Student loans? He shook his head. Debt before you even start working. And for what? A degree in business? You think you're going to be some big-shot CEO? My mother shot him a warning look. Carlos, let her dream. Dreams don't pay bills, Maria. You know that better than anyone. He folded his newspaper with a sharp snap. Sarah, be realistic. Community college is cheaper. You can get a good job right out of high school. Walmart's always hiring, and they have benefits. But, Dad, this is my chance to. Your chance to what? End up drowning in debt like your cousin Tony? He went to college, got his fancy degree, and now he's 35 and still living with his mother because he can't pay off his loans. The comparison stung. Tony had always been held up as a cautionary tale in our family, the one who'd aimed too high and fallen flat. I didn't want to be another cautionary tale, but I also didn't want to give up before I'd even started. I could study business management, I said quietly. Learn how companies work, how to run things properly. My father's laugh was sharp and dismissive. Mija, people like us don't run companies. We work for them. The sooner you accept that, the happier you'll be. People like us. Those 3 words had haunted me for years. What did that mean exactly? That we were too poor? Too brown? Too working class to dream beyond our circumstances? I never asked, but the implication was clear. Know your place, stay in your lane, don't reach for things that weren't meant for you. I went to college anyway, working nights at a local diner to help cover expenses my scholarship didn't touch. My parents weren't unsupportive, exactly, but they weren't encouraging either. They treated my education like an expensive hobby rather than an investment in my future. Everything changed during my junior year, Masalo. I was in my marketing class, working on a project about retail consumer behavior, when my phone buzzed with a call from my mother. Her voice was shaky, different. Sarah, Mija, I need you to come home. There's something we need to discuss. I drove the 45 minutes from Tempe to Phoenix, with my heart hammering in my chest. When I walked into our small living room, both my parents were sitting on the couch, my father's arm around my mother's shoulders. She'd been crying. What's wrong? I asked, though part of me already knew. I went to the doctor last week, my mother said, her voice steady but quiet. For those headaches I've been having. They found something. Breast cancer. Stage 2. Treatable, they said, but the treatment would be expensive and long. My mother's insurance through the hospital would cover most of it, but not all. There would be co-pays, medications, time off work she couldn't afford to take. How much? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. My father handed me a folder full of medical estimates and insurance forms. Between treatments, medications, and lost wages, we're looking at about $40,000 over the next year. I stared at the numbers, my college education suddenly feeling like a luxury we couldn't afford. I can drop out, I said immediately. Get a full-time job, help with the bills. No, my mother said firmly. Absolutely not. We'll figure this out. But the math was simple and brutal. My parents' combined income barely covered their existing expenses. My part-time job at the diner paid enough for gas and groceries, but it wouldn't make a dent in medical bills. We needed more money, and we needed it fast. That's when I made the decision that would change the trajectory of my life. I took a leave of absence from school. Temporary, I told myself, and applied for a full-time position at the Walmart near our house. The pay was better than the diner, the hours were consistent, and they had good health insurance that could help with future medical expenses. I was supposed to go back to school after my mother's treatment ended. That was the plan. But one semester of leave became 2, then 3. My mother's treatment went well. She's been cancer-free for 6 years now. But by the time she was healthy again, I'd been promoted to department manager. The money was steady, my parents needed help with their mortgage, and going back to school felt like a risk we couldn't afford. Just until we get back on our feet, I told myself. But months turned into years, and suddenly I was 29 years old with a name tag instead of a diploma. The worst part wasn't the job itself. I actually did like working at Walmart. I was good with customers, efficient with inventory, and I'd learned more about business operations in 7 years of retail than I probably would have in any classroom. The worst part was the way people looked at me when I told them what I did for a living. Like Jessica at dinner tonight. Like my father when he said people like us. Like I'd somehow failed at life because I chose stability over status. But they didn't know about the notebook I kept beside my bed, filled with observations about everything Walmart did right and everything they did wrong. They didn't know about the business books I checked out from the library, or the online courses I took during my lunch breaks. They didn't know about the suppliers I'd met, the vendors who'd started asking for my opinion on product placement and inventory cycles. Most importantly, they didn't know about the opportunity I'd discovered 3 months ago. I was working late one evening, helping to set up a new display of home goods, when I overheard a conversation between 2 corporate managers who'd come to evaluate our store's performance. They were discussing the challenges of serving smaller communities, places too small for a full Walmart supercenter but too big to ignore completely. The real opportunity, one of them said, is in these mid-size markets, towns with 10 to 30,000 people. They're underserved by major retailers, but there's definitely demand for quality merchandise at competitive prices. The other manager nodded. The problem is the investment. Building a new supercenter doesn't make financial sense for markets that small. And our smaller format stores don't quite hit the sweet spot either. I'd listened to that conversation with growing excitement because I knew exactly what they were talking about. I'd grown up in communities like that, places where people drove an hour to shop at a decent department store, where local options were limited and expensive. There was definitely a gap in the market. More importantly, I thought I knew how to fill it. That night, I'd gone home and started researching. Demographics of mid-sized towns within driving distance of Phoenix. Commercial real estate prices. Supplier relationships. Startup costs. Profit margins. Competition analysis. What I discovered was that they were right. There was an opportunity. A big one. But it wasn't for Walmart. It was for someone willing to think smaller and move faster. Someone who understood both sides of the equation. What customers needed and what it took to run a profitable retail operation. Someone like me. The business plan had been taking shape in my head for months, but I'd been too scared to put it on paper. Too scared to make it real. Because if I wrote it down, if I researched it thoroughly, if I took it seriously, then I'd have to confront the possibility that I might actually be capable of more than stocking shelves and managing inventory. I'd have to confront the possibility that my father was wrong. That people like us could run companies, could build something from nothing, could succeed in ways that our families never imagined possible. Sitting in my car outside my apartment complex, Jessica's words still ringing in my ears, I made a decision. I was going to stop being afraid. I was going to stop making myself small to make other people comfortable. I was going to write the business plan. I was going to apply for the loan. I was going to take the risk. And the next time someone asked me if I was going to work at Walmart forever, I was going to have a very different answer. The wound Jessica had reopened tonight wasn't just about her dismissive comments. It was about every time I'd been told to lower my expectations, to be grateful for what I had, to stop reaching for things that weren't meant for people like me. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to prove them all wrong. Monday morning arrived with the sharp crack of my alarm at 5:30 a.m., but I was already awake, staring at the ceiling and replaying Saturday night's humiliation on an endless loop. I'd barely slept, my mind churning between Jessica's condescending laughter and the business plan that had been living in my head for months like a secret I was too afraid to tell. I dragged myself through my morning routine, shower, coffee, the navy blue uniform that had become like a second skin. But as I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, adjusting my name tag for what felt like the 10,000th time, Something inside me shifted. Maybe it was exhaustion from lying awake all night, or maybe it was the echo of Jessica's voice saying forever like it was a prison sentence. But suddenly, I couldn't stand the reflection staring back at me, not because of the uniform. I'd never been ashamed of honest work, but because I could see the resignation in my own eyes, the way I'd been shrinking myself to fit other people's expectations for so long that I'd almost forgotten I had any other options. The drive to work took me past the old shopping center on Camelback Road, the one that had been half empty for 2 years since the anchor tenant moved out. I'd driven this route hundreds of times, but today I found myself pulling into the parking lot instead of continuing to the store. I sat there for a moment, engine running, staring at the for lease signs that dotted the storefronts like missing teeth. 12,000 square feet in the former electronics store. Perfect corner location with highway visibility. Asking price that was probably negotiable, given how long it had been vacant. I had looked up the listing 3 weeks ago during my lunch break, bookmarking it on my phone with trembling fingers. But I'd never actually driven by to see it in person. Now, sitting in my car as the Arizona sun painted the empty windows gold, I could picture it so clearly it made my chest tight. Clean, bright aisles. Reasonable prices on quality merchandise. Helpful staff who actually knew their inventory. The kind of store where families could shop without feeling either gouged or judged. The kind of store that had been missing from communities like mine for far too long. My phone buzzed with a text from my supervisor, Derek. "Sarah, can you come in early? We're short-staffed and have a truck delivery." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "On my way." But I didn't move. Instead, I opened my phone's notepad and started typing. Martinez Family Retail. Business plan draft location. 3847 East Camelback Road, Target Market. Middle-income families, 25 to 65 years old. Product mix. Home goods, clothing, electronics, seasonal items. Estimated startup costs. $300,000, projected break-even, 18 months. I'd done the math dozens of times in my head, but seeing it typed out on my phone screen made it feel real in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. $300,000. It might as well have been $3 million for all the access I had to that kind of money. But see me, except that wasn't entirely true. The night before, after arriving home from the disastrous family dinner, I'd done something I'd been putting off for weeks. I'd filled out the preliminary application for a small business administration loan, the one I'd bookmarked on the SBA website back in June. I hadn't submitted it. I'd saved it as a draft, like digital evidence of a dream I wasn't quite ready to chase. But I'd filled it out. Every question about business experience, 7 years in retail operations, education, partial college degree in business, financial history, good credit, steady employment, and personal investment, the $15,000 I'd saved over the past 3 years. $15,000. My emergency fund? Built $5 and $10 at a time from overtime shifts and skipped dinners out. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was proof that I could commit to a goal, that I could sacrifice for something bigger than immediate gratification. My phone buzzed again. "Derek. Sarah? Everything okay?" I looked up at the empty storefront, then back at my phone. This was it, the choice point I'd been avoiding for months. I could drive to work, put on my customer service smile, and spend another day managing someone else's vision. I could keep telling myself that I was learning, that I was building experience, that someday I'd be ready to take the leap. Or I could stop waiting for someday and make it today. I called Derek. "Hey, I need to take a personal day," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Today? We really need you, Sarah. Can't it wait until your day off?" "No," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "It can't wait." There was a pause. "Is everything okay? This isn't like you." He was right. It wasn't like me. The old me would have apologized, would have rearranged my personal life around work schedules and other people's needs. But the old me had also let fear make her decisions for too long. "Everything's fine," I said. "I just have some important business to take care of." After I hung up, I sat in the silence for a moment, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then I pulled up the contact information for Marcus Thompson, the commercial real estate agent whose name was on the for lease sign. Thompson Commercial Properties. This is Marcus. Hi, my name is Sarah Martinez. I'm calling about the retail space at 3847 East Camelback Road. Is it still available? Absolutely. Are you looking for space for an existing business or a new venture? I took a deep breath. New venture. I'm interested in seeing the space this week if possible. Fantastic. I have some time this afternoon if you'd like. What type of business are you planning? Retail. General merchandise, family-oriented. Perfect. The space would be ideal for that kind of operation. Shall we say 2 p.m.? After we hung up, I sat there for another few minutes, processing what I'd just done. I'd made an appointment to look at commercial real estate. I'd taken a personal day to pursue a business opportunity. I'd started saying yes to the possibility that had been living in the shadows of my mind for months. But even as excitement bubbled up in my chest, doubt crept in around the edges. What did I really know about running a business? Sure, I understood retail operations from the employee's side, but that was different from being responsible for everything. Inventory, payroll, marketing, customer acquisition, profit and loss. What if I failed? What if I used up my savings and ended up worse off than when I started? What if Jessica and everyone else who'd written me off turned out to be right? I thought about my mother, about the quiet pride in her voice when she talked about my work ethic. I thought about my grandmother, who'd built a small grocery store into a neighborhood institution back when women weren't supposed to be business owners. I thought about all the customers I'd helped over the years, the ones who'd thanked me for going the extra mile, who'd specifically sought me out because they trusted my recommendations. And I thought about Jessica's laugh, the way it had dismissed not just my current job but my entire potential. Wherefore? My phone rang. It was my mother. Mia, how was the dinner Saturday night? I'm sorry your father, and I couldn't make it. I hesitated. My parents didn't know about the business plan, about the loan application, about any of it. They thought I was settled, stable, content with my life as it was. Part of me wanted to tell her everything, to share the excitement and terror of what I was considering. But another part of me was afraid she'd react like my father had all those years ago, worried about risk, focused on security, encouraging me to be grateful for what I had instead of reaching for what I wanted. It was fine, I said. The usual family stuff. Good. Listen, I called because Mrs. Rodriguez next door was asking about you. Her daughter is looking for work, and she was wondering if Walmart was hiring. I can check for her. Thank you, Misha. You're such a good girl, always helping everyone else. After we hung up, I stared at my phone again. Always helping everyone else. It was true. I'd spent most of my adult life putting other people's needs first. My parents' medical bills, my supervisor's scheduling requests, customers' questions, my extended family's expectations. But when was the last time I'd put my own dreams first? When was the last time I'd been willing to risk security for the possibility of something bigger? I started the car and drove away from the empty shopping center, but I didn't go home, and I didn't go to work. Instead, I drove to the Phoenix Public Library downtown, the one with the Business Resource Center and free Wi-Fi. I found a quiet corner table, opened my laptop, and pulled up the SBA loan application I'd been too scared to submit. For the next 2 hours, I refined it. I researched comparable businesses, found market analysis data, calculated more precise startup costs. I wrote a mission statement that made my hands shake. Martinez Family Retail exists to serve underserved communities with quality merchandise at fair prices, creating jobs and building relationships that strengthen families and neighborhoods. By noon, I had a complete loan application. 23 pages of my dreams translated into business language, backed up with research and projections and plans. It wasn't perfect. I'd need help from accountants and lawyers and marketing experts if this moved forward. But it was real. It was professional. It was the kind of document that said, "Take me seriously," instead of, "I'm just a Walmart employee with big ideas." I saved the file, closed my laptop, and walked outside into the desert heat. In 3 hours, I had an appointment to look at retail space. Tonight I was going to submit a loan application that could change my life. Up. The choice had been made. Not in a moment of anger or rebellion, but in the quiet certainty that I was ready to bet on myself for the first time in my adult life. Jessica had asked if I was going to work at Walmart forever. The answer, I realized, was about to become much more interesting than she'd anticipated. The commercial real estate appointment changed everything. Marcus Thompson met me at the empty storefront at exactly 2 p.m., a tall man in his 50s wearing a polo shirt and the kind of easy smile that came from years of matching people with their dreams. As he unlocked the glass doors and led me into the vacant space, I felt something click into place, not just in my mind, but in my chest, like a puzzle piece finding its home. Previous tenant was an electronics store, Marcus explained, his voice echoing in the empty space. They had a good run for about 8 years, but couldn't compete with online sales. Good bones, though. Excellent HVAC system, updated electrical, plenty of parking. I walked slowly through the space, my footsteps sharp against the polished concrete floor. 12,000 square feet felt massive when it was empty, but I could see it filled. Electronics and home goods along the back wall. Clothing displays in the center. Seasonal items near the front entrance. A customer service counter positioned where staff could see the entire floor. "What's the monthly rent?" I asked, though I'd already researched it online. Listed at $8,000, but the owner's motivated. Property's been vacant for 6 months now, and empty retail space doesn't generate revenue. I think we could negotiate something in the $7,500 range for the right tenant. $7,500 a month. I did quick math in my head. $90,000 a year just for rent, not including utilities, insurance, or any of the other dozen expenses I'd researched. It was a staggering amount of money for someone who'd never earned more than $35,000 in a single year. But it was also an opportunity. Prime location, highway visibility, established parking and infrastructure. In the right hands, this space could generate significant revenue. "I'd like to put together a proposal," I heard myself saying. "I'll need a few days to finalize some details." Marcus handed me his card with genuine enthusiasm. "Take your time. I have a good feeling about this, Sarah. This space needs someone who understands retail, and it's obvious you do." That evening, I submitted my SBA loan application. 23 pages of dreams and data, uploaded to a government website with a click that felt like jumping off a cliff. The confirmation email arrived 3 minutes later. "Application received. You can expect initial review within 4 to 6 weeks." 6 weeks felt like a lifetime. The next morning, I went back to work at Walmart, but everything felt different. I moved through my usual routines, checking inventory, helping customers, managing my department, but part of my brain was constantly running calculations. How much did we pay for this particular item? What was our markup? How did our pricing compare to competitors? Which products moved fastest, and why? I'd been learning these lessons for 7 years without realizing it. Now, suddenly, every shift felt like a masterclass in retail management. Derek noticed the change immediately. "You seem different," he said during our Tuesday morning meeting. "More focused. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I said. "I'm just paying attention to things I maybe took for granted before." It wasn't entirely a lie. I was paying attention to supply chain logistics, to seasonal purchasing patterns, to the way customers moved through the store and what drew their eye. I started carrying a small notebook, jotting down observations that might be useful later. The way display height affected sales, the importance of clear signage, the difference between helpful employees and pushy ones. But I was also preparing. Over the next 3 weeks, I spent every free moment researching suppliers, visiting potential competitors, and refining my business plan. I drove to Tempe, to Glendale, to smaller towns like Casa Grande and Payson, studying retail operations that served communities similar to the one I wanted to target. Most of these stores fell into 2 categories: big box retailers that felt impersonal and overwhelming, or small local shops that were charming but limited in selection and often overpriced. There was a gap in the middle, a sweet spot for a store that offered variety and value without sacrificing personal service. The breakthrough came during a conversation with Linda Vasquez, a buyer I'd met through work who specialized in home goods and seasonal merchandise. She was in town for a vendor meeting, and I'd offered to buy her coffee and pick her brain about the industry. "You're asking good questions," she said, stirring sugar into her latte as we sat in a coffee shop near my apartment. A lot of people think retail is easy because they're customers. They don't understand the complexity of inventory management, supplier relationships, seasonal planning. What would you say is the biggest challenge for someone starting a new store? She considered this carefully. Cash flow. Specifically, having enough working capital to weather the slow periods while you're building customer base. Most new retailers underestimate how long it takes to establish brand loyalty. What about supplier relationships? How hard is it to get good terms when you're small? Harder than it used to be, but not impossible. Especially if you're buying smart, focusing on proven products rather than trying to be too trendy. And if you can demonstrate that you understand the market you're serving. She gave me contact information for 3 suppliers who worked with independent retailers, along with advice that proved invaluable. Start small, but think systematically. Don't try to be everything to everyone right away. Pick 3 or 4 product categories, do them really well, then expand gradually. By early October, I had a revised business plan that was significantly more sophisticated than my original draft. I'd identified specific supplier relationships, developed detailed financial projections, and created a timeline for opening that accounted for everything from permit approval to staff training. The loan approval came on a Thursday. I was restocking cleaning supplies when my phone buzzed with an email from the SBA. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely open it. Congratulations. Your Small Business Administration loan application has been approved for $275,000 at 6.5% interest over 10 years. I read the email 3 times before the words sank in. Approved. $275,000. Enough to secure the retail space, purchase initial inventory, and cover operating expenses for the first year. I sat down on a box of paper towels and cried, not from sadness or fear, but from pure overwhelm. 6 weeks ago, this had been a fantasy. Now it was real money, real opportunity, real responsibility. I was going to open a store. I was going to be a business owner. Vacan. I was going to prove Jessica wrong. The next few weeks blurred together in a whirlwind of legal paperwork, permit applications, and vendor meetings. I signed a lease agreement for the Camelback Road space. I established an LLC, Martinez Family Retail, just like I'd written in my notebook that first day. I opened business bank accounts and applied for a tax ID number. Each step felt surreal, like I was playing dress-up in someone else's life. But the paperwork was real, the deadlines were real, and the responsibility was real. The hardest part was telling my family. Not plans. I'd managed to keep everything secret for almost 2 months. But once I signed the lease, it became impossible to hide. Too many daytime appointments, too many phone calls, too many evenings spent at the library working on business plans instead of relaxing at home. I finally told my parents over dinner on a Sunday in November. I have something to share with you both, I said, my fork trembling slightly as I set it down. I'm opening a retail store. I got approved for a business loan, and I've signed a lease. The grand opening is planned for February. The silence that followed was deafening. My father was the first to speak. Sarah, Mija, what are you talking about? You have a good job, benefits, security. I'll still have security, Dad, just different security. The kind that comes from building something myself. My mother reached across the table and took my hand. This is a big step, baby. Are you sure you're ready for this kind of responsibility? I've been preparing for months. I have a detailed business plan, experienced suppliers lined up, enough capital to weather the startup period. I'm as ready as I can be. My father shook his head. Retail is a tough business, Sarah. Most small stores fail within the first 2 years. You could lose everything. Or I could succeed, create jobs, serve my community, build something that lasts. But why take the risk? You're doing well at Walmart. You could probably get promoted to management, maybe even district level eventually. I thought about Jessica's voice, about being forever defined by other people's limitations for me. Because I want to build something of my own, Dad. Because I think I can do this. And I want to try. My mother squeezed my hand. What can we do to help? That question, offered without judgment, without discouragement, meant everything. It was the first time anyone in my family had asked how they could support my dreams instead of questioning whether I should have them. Just believe in me, I said. That's all I need. By December, construction had begun. I hired a local contractor to refresh the interior. New paint, updated lighting, custom shelving units that would maximize the space while keeping it open and welcoming. I spent my days at Walmart and my evenings at the new store, watching it transform from an empty shell into something that looked like my vision. I gave my notice at Walmart just before Christmas. Derek was surprised but supportive. "I had a feeling something was brewing," he said. "You've been different these past few months. More intentional. Like you were studying us instead of just working for us." "I was," I admitted. "This place taught me everything I know about retail. I'm grateful for that." "Well, if you ever need a reference or want to bounce ideas off someone, don't hesitate to call. And Sarah? I think you're going to do great." As I walked out of Walmart for the last time as an employee, I felt a mixture of nostalgia and excitement. I was leaving behind 7 years of steady paychecks and predictable routines. But I was walking towards something I'd built with my own hands, shaped by my own vision. The girl who'd been dismissed at family dinners was about to become a business owner. And I couldn't wait to see Jessica's reaction when she found out. January brought the kind of Arizona winter that made transplants from colder states gloat on social media, crisp mornings that warmed into perfect 70-degree afternoons. But I barely noticed the weather. Every day was a blur of contractor meetings, vendor calls, and the 1,000 small decisions that turned an empty retail space into an actual store. I was knee-deep in paint samples and shelving configurations when I met the people who would become my chosen family. It started with Rosa Delgado, the owner of Delgado's Custom Signage, a small shop 3 blocks from my future store. I'd found her through a Google search for local sign makers, but when I walked into her workshop on a Tuesday morning in mid-January, I realized I'd discovered something much more valuable than a vendor. "You're the girl opening the new store on Camelback," she said, not looking up from the vinyl lettering she was applying to a restaurant window sign. She was probably in her early 50s, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and hands that moved with the confidence of someone who'd been perfecting her craft for decades. "Sarah Martinez," I said, extending my hand. "How did you know?" She smiled, finally looking up. "Honey, this is Phoenix, not New York." Word travels fast, especially when someone young is taking a real risk. "Marcus Thompson mentioned you when he ordered signs for another property. Said you had good questions and a solid plan." Over the next hour, Rosa transformed from vendor to advisor to friend. She'd opened her sign business 15 years earlier, after getting laid off from a corporate marketing job. She understood the terror and exhilaration of betting everything on yourself. "First year's the hardest," she said, sketching out design options for my storefront sign. "Not because of the money, though that's tough too, but because you're constantly questioning every decision. Did I order enough inventory? Too much. Are my prices right? Am I crazy for thinking this will work? Are you trying to scare me?" I asked, only half joking. "No, Mija, I'm trying to prepare you. And I'm telling you that you'll get through it, because you're asking the right questions before you open. Most people wing it and wonder why they fail." She introduced me to the Phoenix Small Business Association, a network I didn't even know existed. The monthly meetings were held in the back room of a Mexican restaurant on Thomas Road, and the first time Rosa dragged me along, I felt like I'd discovered a secret society. There was James Chen, who'd built a successful food truck business into 3 brick-and-mortar locations. Maria Santos, who'd turned her grandmother's tamale recipe into a wholesale operation, serving grocery stores across the Southwest. David Kim, who'd opened a computer repair shop that had evolved into custom tech solutions for small businesses. "New blood," announced Janet Morrison, the association's president, when Rosa introduced me. Janet owned a boutique that specialized in locally made jewelry and had the kind of sharp business sense that made her both intimidating and inspiring. "What's your story, Sarah?" I gave them the condensed version. 7 years at Walmart, business loan approval, plans to open a general merchandise store targeting underserved communities. But instead of the polite nods I'd expected, they leaned forward with genuine interest. "Smart positioning," said James. "Too many people try to compete directly with the big boxes. You're finding a gap." "What's your supply chain strategy?" asked Maria. "Local sourcing or national distributors?" For the next 2 hours, we talked shop. They shared vendor recommendations, warned me about common pitfalls, and offered insights I never would have discovered on my own. When James mentioned that his food supplier also handled household goods and was always looking for new retailers to work with, I felt like I'd struck gold. But more than the business advice, what struck me was the energy in that room. These were people who'd taken risks, faced down fear, and built something from nothing. They understood what I was going through because they'd been there themselves. "You'll want to join our text chain," said Janet, as the meeting wrapped up. "We share everything: vendor recommendations, customer referrals, heads up about supply chain issues. Small business owners have to stick together." That text chain became my lifeline over the next month. When my contractor hit a snag with city permits, David knew exactly which office to call and who to ask for. When I was struggling to find affordable point-of-sale software, Maria connected me with a local developer who specialized in retail systems. When I panicked about grand opening marketing, James shared the exact social media strategy that had worked for his newest location. But it was Rosa who became my closest ally. She had a key to my store and would stop by in the evenings to check on construction progress, often bringing coffee and the kind of practical wisdom that only comes from experience. "You're doing good work here," she said one night in late January, as we stood in what would soon be my electronics section. The shelving was installed, the lighting was finished, and the space was finally starting to look like a real store. "But are you taking care of yourself?" I realized I'd been surviving on energy bars and 3 hours of sleep for weeks. "I'm fine, just busy." "Sarah, listen to me. The business will only be as strong as you are. You can't pour from an empty cup." She was right, of course. I'd been so focused on getting everything perfect that I'd forgotten to eat real meals, to sleep enough, to maintain any kind of balance. The next day, she showed up with her husband, Miguel, and their teenage daughter, Carmen, carrying grocery bags and casserole dishes. "Family dinner," Rosa announced. "We're eating here, in your new store, and we're celebrating how far you've come." We sat on folding chairs in my future customer service area, eating Rosa's incredible pozole and talking about everything except business. Miguel was a mechanic with a dry sense of humor who kept us laughing with stories about the weird things people did to their cars. Carmen was a high school senior with plans to study business at ASU. She was fascinated by my journey and asked thoughtful questions about entrepreneurship. "It's brave, what you're doing," Carmen said. "Most people our age just talk about starting businesses. You actually did it." That night, after the Delgados left, I sat alone in my almost finished store and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not the anxious excitement of checking items off my to-do list, but genuine contentment. These people, Rosa, Miguel, Carmen, the whole Small Business Association crew, they'd become my cheerleaders, my advisors, my chosen family. They saw me not as Sarah, the former Walmart employee who was probably getting in over her head, but as Sarah, the entrepreneur who was building something meaningful. They celebrated my small victories and helped me navigate the setbacks. They believed in me even when I struggled to believe in myself. Aka hama hamedeka poli. The support became even more crucial when my first major crisis hit in early February, just weeks before my planned grand opening. I was doing a final inventory check when my phone rang. It was Kevin Walsh from Morrison Supply, one of my primary vendors for home goods. His voice was tense. "Sarah, I've got bad news. The warehouse fire in Oklahoma knocked out a significant portion of our spring inventory. We're not going to be able to fulfill your opening order." My stomach dropped. Morrison Supply was supposed to provide about 40% of my initial inventory, everything from kitchen appliances to garden tools to seasonal decorations. Without that merchandise, I'd have a beautiful store with half-empty shelves. "How much can you fulfill?" I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "Maybe 30%. And it won't be here until late March." Late March meant missing the spring shopping season, missing my grand opening timeline, and potentially missing my first quarter revenue projections. I thanked Kevin and hung up, then sat down on a box of inventory and felt the weight of impending failure settle on my shoulders. That's when I remembered Janet's advice. Small business owners have to stick together. I sent a message to the Business Association text chain, "Emergency vendor situation. Need alternative suppliers for home goods/seasonal items ASAP. Opening in 3 weeks." My phone started buzzing immediately. James. Call Roberto at Southwest Distribution. Mention my name. Maria. I have a contact at Valley Home Goods. They specialize in emergency orders. David. My cousin runs a wholesale operation in Tucson. Can get you connected. Janet. Come to the shop tomorrow morning. I have vendor catalogs you need to see. Within 48 hours, I had 3 new suppliers lined up, and a revised inventory plan that was actually more diverse than my original one. Roberto at Southwest Distribution not only filled the gap left by Morrison Supply, but offered better terms than I'd been getting. Valley Home Goods connected me with local artisans, whose products would set my store apart from generic big-box offerings. Crisis averted, I texted the group, along with a photo of the delivery trucks lined up outside my store. That's what family does, Rosa replied. Family. That's exactly what they'd become. Not the family I'd been born into, the one that questioned my dreams and expected me to stay small, but the family I'd found through shared purpose and mutual support. The night before my grand opening, the whole crew showed up for what Rosa called a blessing ceremony. We walked through the store together, admiring the clean aisles, the organized displays, the bright lighting that made everything look inviting and professional. You did this, said Janet, her voice full of genuine pride. 6 months ago, this was an empty building. Now it's going to serve your community and create jobs. That's real impact. As I locked up the store that night, I thought about Jessica's question. Are you going to work at Walmart forever? She'd meant it as an insult, a way to keep me in the box she'd built for me in her mind. But standing in front of Martinez Family Retail, surrounded by people who'd helped me build something extraordinary, I realized she'd actually done me a favor. Her dismissive question had forced me to answer a more important one. What did I really want for my life? The answer was walking toward me now, ready to help me greet customers for the very first time. Kashayim. I wasn't working at Walmart forever. I wasn't working for anyone else, period. I was working for myself, my community, and the family I'd chosen along the way. Grand opening day arrived with the kind of Arizona sunshine that photographers dream about. Clear skies, perfect temperature, and light that made everything look like it belonged in a magazine. I stood outside Martinez Family Retail at 7 a.m., an hour before we opened, watching Rosa hang the final banner while Miguel checked the parking lot one last time for any stray construction debris. The store looked perfect. Clean white walls, bright LED lighting, organized displays that invited browsing without feeling cluttered. Local news had run a small piece about the opening, and I'd distributed flyers throughout the neighborhood. My first 3 employees: Jennifer, a recent college graduate; Marcus, a retired teacher looking for part-time work; and Anna, a bilingual customer service specialist, were ready and trained. Everything that could be prepared had been prepared. Now came the part one couldn't control: whether customers would actually show up. The first person through the door at 8 a.m. was Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who lived in the apartments across the street. She moved slowly through the aisles, examining price tags and testing the quality of items with the careful attention of someone who'd learned to make every dollar count. "This is nice," she said, holding up a set of kitchen towels. "Good quality, fair price. Better than driving all the way to the big stores." By noon, we'd had a steady stream of customers. Not the overwhelming crowd I'd secretly hoped for, but a respectable showing for a first day. Young mothers with toddlers in tow, retirees looking for household items, teenagers shopping for phone accessories. The kind of community-focused clientele I'd envisioned when I wrote my business plan. The real test came that afternoon. For Forbo also. I was helping a customer find birthday party supplies when Jennifer approached me with a concerned expression. "Sarah, there's someone here asking a lot of questions about the business. She says she's doing a comparison study?" I looked toward the front of the store and saw a woman in an expensive suit taking photos of price tags with her phone. She was mid-30s, blonde, carrying a leather portfolio that probably cost more than most of my customers spent on groceries in a month. "Excuse me," I said, approaching her with my best customer service smile. "Can I help you find something specific?" She looked up with the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. Actually, I'm Rachel Stevens from Stevens Retail Consulting. I'm conducting a market analysis for a client who's considering entering this area. My stomach dropped, but I kept my expression neutral. Market analysis? Competitive research, she clarified, as if that made it better. Product selection, pricing strategies, customer demographics, standard industry practice. I knew what this was really about. Some big box retailer was considering moving into my market area and wanted to understand the local competition. The fact that they were taking me seriously enough to send someone for research should have felt flattering. Instead, it felt like a threat. "Who's your client?" I asked. "I'm not at liberty to say, but they're a major regional chain with significant expansion plans." She gestured around the store. Impressive setup for such a new operation. "How many locations are you planning?" The question felt loaded. If I said this was my only location, would that make me seem small and vulnerable? If I suggested expansion plans I didn't have, would that seem defensive? "We're focused on serving this community well," I said diplomatically. "Quality over quantity." Rachel nodded and made a note in her portfolio. Smart approach, though I imagine it's challenging to compete on price when you don't have the purchasing power of larger chains. She was right, of course. My wholesale costs were higher than what major retailers paid, which meant my profit margins were thinner. I'd compensated by focusing on customer service and product curation, but that didn't change the fundamental economics. "We compete on value," I said. "Not just price, but the overall shopping experience." "Of course." Another note. "Well, best of luck. It's always nice to see local entrepreneurs taking risks." The way she said risks made it sound like she was talking about someone about to walk a tightrope without a net. After she left, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just been sized up by a predator. I called Rosa, who arrived within 20 minutes carrying coffee and the kind of no-nonsense energy I desperately needed. "Big box vultures," she said, after I described the encounter. "They scout successful independent operations, then move in with deeper pockets and lower prices. Happened to 3 businesses on this strip over the past 5 years. So what do? You do what you've been doing, but faster and better. Build customer loyalty that can't be bought. Create relationships, not just transactions." That evening, I called an emergency meeting with my business association family. We gathered at Janet's boutique after hours, the jewelry cases glinting under soft lighting, as we sat in a circle like generals planning a campaign. "Competition was always going to come," said James. "The question is whether you're ready for it." "What's your cash flow situation?" asked Maria, ever practical. "How long can you operate if they undercut your prices by 20%? I'd run those numbers obsessively when I first wrote my business plan. 6 months, maybe 8 if I cut my own salary. "That's better than most," said David. "But you need to use that time to become indispensable to your customers." Janet leaned forward. "Tell me about your customer interactions today. What did people say? What did they respond to?" I thought about Mrs. Chen, about the young mother who'd thanked me for helping her find exactly what she needed, about the teenager who'd been surprised that I knew the technical specs of the phone case he was buying. "They liked that we actually talked to them," I said. "Not just, 'Can I help you find something?' but real conversations about what they needed and why." "That's your advantage," said Rosa. "They can't automate genuine care. They can't mass-produce relationships." Over the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into building those relationships with desperate intensity. I learned customers' names, remembered their preferences, asked about their families. When Mrs. Rodriguez mentioned she was hosting her granddaughter's quinceañera, I special ordered decorations in exactly the right shade of pink. When Mr. Thompson said he was starting a vegetable garden, I researched which tools would work best for Arizona soil and climate. It was working. Sales were steady, customer satisfaction was high, and word-of-mouth referrals were bringing in new shoppers every day. Then the bomb dropped. I was closing the store on a Thursday evening when my phone rang. It was Marcus Thompson, the commercial real estate agent who'd helped me find the space. "Sarah, I have some news you need to hear. Fresh Mart announced today that they're opening a superstore location about a mile from you. Soft opening in August, grand opening in September. Fresh Mart. a regional chain known for aggressive pricing and massive selection. The kind of store that could carry everything I sold, plus groceries, pharmacy, and automotive services, all under one roof, with the purchasing power to undercut my prices on every single item. How big? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. 80,000 square feet. Full grocery, general merchandise, electronics, seasonal goods. They're calling it a neighborhood superstore. 80,000 square feet to my 12,000. A corporate budget against my carefully managed cash flow. Supply chain relationships built over decades against the vendor connections I'd painstakingly established over the past year. After I hung up, I sat in my empty store and felt the weight of impending disaster settle over me like a heavy blanket. All those months of planning, all that risk, all the support from Rosa and Janet and the rest of my chosen family, was it all going to be wiped out by a corporation that saw my success as nothing more than market validation for their expansion? I thought about calling my parents, but I could already hear my father's voice. This is why you don't take unnecessary risks, Mija. This is why you stick with stable jobs. I thought about Jessica's laughter, about how she'd react when she heard that my little retail experiment had been crushed by real competition. But then I thought about Mrs. Chen, about the way her face had lit up when she found exactly what she needed at a fair price. I thought about the quinceañera decorations that had made Mrs. Rodriguez cry with happiness. I thought about the customer who'd driven 15 minutes out of his way to shop with us because, as he put it, you people actually give a damn. Freshmart could match my prices, maybe even beat them. But they couldn't match the relationships I'd built, the trust I'd earned, the way my team knew our customers' names and stories and needs. They could build a bigger store, but they couldn't build a stronger community. I pulled out my phone and sent a message to the Business Association group chat. Emergency meeting tomorrow night. We need to talk strategy. James responded immediately. David versus Goliath time? Something like that, I typed back. Janet's response made me smile despite everything. Good. It's about time you got a real challenge. Let's see what you're really made of. The crisis was real, the threat was serious, and the next few months would determine whether Martinez family retail survived or became another cautionary tale about small businesses trying to compete with corporate giants. But for the first time since Marcus's phone call, I didn't feel defeated. I felt focused. Freshmart was about to learn that there's a difference between serving customers and serving a community. And my community was about to see exactly how hard I was willing to fight for them. Plans? The real battle was just beginning. Plans are all beginning. The Phoenix Small Business Association emergency meeting turned into a war council. Janet's boutique had never held so many people, with some of us sitting on jewelry display cases and others leaning against the walls. The energy in the room was electric, not the nervous excitement of new entrepreneurs, but the focused intensity of seasoned business owners who'd been through battles before. First things first, said Janet, spreading a local map across her main counter. We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Freshmart isn't just targeting Sarah. They're targeting all of us. She was right. The proposed superstore location was strategically positioned to impact several association members. James's newest food truck location was only 2 blocks away. Maria's specialty foods were carried by 3 local grocers who would struggle to compete with Freshmart's pricing. David's computer repair shop would face competition from their electronics section. This is bigger than one store, said Rosa, her voice carrying the weight of experience. This is about whether independent businesses can survive in this community. Over the next 3 hours, we developed what James dubbed the Phoenix strategy, a coordinated response that leveraged our collective strengths while addressing Freshmart's inevitable advantages. They'll beat us on price, said Maria. That's just math. But they can't beat us on everything. We identified our advantages: local knowledge, personalized service, community investment, flexibility, and authentic relationships. Then we planned how to maximize each one. David suggested a customer loyalty program that connected all our businesses. Spend money at Martinez Family Retail, get discounts at Rosa's signage shop. Buy lunch from James's food truck, earn points toward purchases at Janet's boutique. Cross-promotion, said Maria, nodding approvingly. Make it harder for customers to abandon the whole network. But the real breakthrough came from Carmen, Rosa's daughter, who'd been quietly listening from the corner. "What if you expanded?" she said suddenly. "Not bigger stores, but more stores. Like, what if Fresh Mart's size becomes their weakness?" Everyone turned to look at her. "Think about it," she continued, gaining confidence. "They're building one huge store to serve a wide area. But what if you open smaller locations in neighborhoods they can't reach? Places where people don't want to drive 20 minutes for groceries and home goods." The room fell silent as we processed this. Then Janet started laughing. "The kid's right," she said. "They're thinking like a corporation, centralized, efficient, economies of scale. But we can think like gorillas, distributed, nimble, embedded in communities." I felt my heart start racing, but not from fear, from possibility. "There are 3 or 4 neighborhoods within 15 miles that fit the demographic profile," I said, my mind already spinning. "Places where people are underserved by retail options." "Do you have the capital for expansion?" asked James, ever practical. "Not yet," I admitted. "But if I can prove the concept works, if I can show strong performance against Fresh Mart competition, investors might be interested." Rosa was nodding. "And you'd have a track record, proof that your model works even against major chain competition." We spent the rest of the evening sketching out a timeline. Fresh Mart's grand opening was scheduled for September. I had 6 months to prepare, to strengthen customer relationships, and to lay groundwork for potential expansion. It was ambitious. It was risky. It was exactly the kind of bold move that could either establish me as a serious regional retailer or destroy everything I'd built. But as I drove home that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced since the day I first walked into the empty storefront. Absolute clarity about what I needed to do. The next morning, I called a staff meeting. Jennifer, Marcus, and Anna gathered in the break room I'd created in the back of the store. Just a small table, a coffee maker, and a bulletin board where we posted customer compliments and photos from community events. "I need to tell you about Fresh Mart," I said, and laid out the situation honestly. The timeline, the competitive threat, the possibility that our jobs might not exist in a year if we didn't fight back. "So what's the plan?" asked Marcus, his retired teacher instincts kicking in. "And what do you need from us?" That question, "What do you need from us?" hit me like a physical blow. These people had jobs because I'd taken a risk on building something. Now they were ready to take risks on keeping it alive. "I need you to help me turn every customer into an advocate," I said. "Not through sales pressure, but through genuine service. I need you to learn names, remember preferences, solve problems. I need you to make this place feel like family." Anna smiled. "We're already doing that." "I know, but now we need to do it better than we ever thought possible." The months that followed were a masterclass in community building. We instituted Coffee Wednesdays, where customers could get free coffee and chat with staff about upcoming purchases or projects. We created a neighborhood board where people could post about lost pets, items for sale, or community events. When Mrs. Rodriguez's quinceañera was featured in the local paper, I framed the article and hung it in our community corner with a note, "Proudly served by Martinez Family Retail." When Mr. Thompson's garden vegetables started producing, he brought us samples and we created a small display about local gardening tips. Most importantly, I started talking to customers about the Fresh Mart situation. Not to criticize the competition, but to explain what made us different. "They'll have more selection," I told Mrs. Chen during one of her regular visits. "But will they know that you prefer the softer dish towels because of your arthritis? Will they remember that your grandson likes the blue notebooks for school? Probably not," she said with a smile. "But you do." By June, our sales had increased by 40% over the previous quarter. Word-of-mouth referrals were bringing in new customers every week. The local newspaper wrote a feature story about our, quote, community-first approach to retail. That's when my parents finally decided to visit the store. They showed up on a Saturday morning, looking slightly overwhelmed by the bustle of weekend shopping. I watched my father's eyes move methodically through the displays, taking in the organization, the cleanliness, the way customers moved comfortably through the space. "This is impressive, Mija," my mother said, her voice carrying genuine pride. "You built all this?" "With a lot of help," I said, gesturing toward Jennifer, who was patiently helping an elderly customer find the right light bulbs. My father was quieter, but I caught him studying the financial charts I kept in my office. Sales figures, profit margins, customer acquisition data. The same man who'd warned me about taking risks was now examining evidence that those risks had paid off. "The bank loan," he said finally. "You're keeping up with payments?" "Ahead of schedule, actually." He nodded, and for a moment I saw something in his expression I'd never seen before. Respect for my business judgment. But the real validation came in late July, when I received a phone call that changed everything. "Ms. Martinez, this is Kevin Chen from Desert Capital Partners. We're a private equity firm that specializes in retail investments. We've been following your progress with great interest." My hands started shaking. "Following my progress? Your business model is exactly what we've been looking for. Community-focused retail with strong customer loyalty and expansion potential. We'd like to discuss a partnership that could accelerate your growth timeline." The meeting took place the following week in a downtown Phoenix office building that screamed money and success. Kevin Chen was probably my age, impeccably dressed with the kind of confidence that came from making deals worth millions of dollars. "We see significant opportunity in the neighborhood retail space," he said, gesturing to a presentation that included analysis of my sales data, demographic studies, and competitive landscape assessments, particularly for operators who understand local markets and can build authentic community connections. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Investment capital for rapid expansion. We're talking about opening 4 new locations over the next 18 months, with the potential for 8 to 10 stores within 3 years. The numbers he showed me were staggering. Investment amounts that would let me build not just 1 or 2 additional stores, but an entire chain. Professional management support, sophisticated marketing, supply chain optimization." "What would you need from me?" I asked. "Operational leadership and continued focus on the community-building strategies that have made this location successful. You'd maintain significant ownership, but you'd have the resources to scale rapidly." It was everything I'd dreamed of and nothing I'd expected. 18 months ago, I'd been stocking shelves and wondering if I'd ever amount to anything more than Jessica's dismissive expectations. Now I was sitting in a conference room discussing plans to build a regional retail chain. But the conversation that mattered most happened that evening, when Jessica called. "Sarah," she said, her voice carrying an unfamiliar note of uncertainty. "I heard through the family that you opened a store. Is that true?" "It's true. Just 1 store? Or—" I thought about Kevin Chen's presentation, about the investment opportunity, about the 4 locations we'd identified for expansion. I thought about the community I'd built, the customers who trusted me, the employees who'd believed in the vision. "Actually, Jessica," I said, letting a smile creep into my voice, "we're in discussions to open our 2nd location this fall, and our 3rd and 4th next year." The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. "Sarah," she said finally, "are you telling me you own multiple stores?" "I'm telling you I'm building a chain." Another pause. Then, I had no idea. That's incredible." For 7 years, I'd imagined this moment. The satisfaction of proving her wrong, of throwing my success in her face, of making her eat every condescending word she'd ever said about my potential. But sitting in my apartment, looking out at the lights of a city where I'd built something real and meaningful, I realized I didn't need her validation anymore. Her opinion of my worth had stopped mattering the day I decided to bet on myself. "Thank you," I said simply. "It's been quite a journey." After we hung up, I pulled out the notebook where I'd first sketched my business plan and wrote a single line. "Working at Walmart forever?" Not even close. The confrontation I'd imagined for so long turned out to be anticlimactic. Because the real victory wasn't proving Jessica wrong, it was proving myself right. 6 months later, I stood in the conference room of my newest location in Scottsdale, watching my regional manager, Jennifer. Yes, the same Jennifer who'd started as my first employee, conduct a training session for our newest team members. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the parking lot of our 3rd store bustling with Saturday morning shoppers, and in the distance, the construction crew putting finishing touches on location number 4. Martinez Family Retail had become exactly what I'd dreamed of that first day in the empty Camelback Road storefront, but bigger, stronger, and more meaningful than I'd ever imagined possible. The Desert Capital Partners investment had closed in September, just 2 weeks before Freshmart's grand opening. Instead of waiting to see how the competition affected my original store, I'd gone on the offensive. We opened Scottsdale in October, Tempe in December, and Glendale was scheduled to launch next month. Each location was tailored to its specific community: bilingual signage in areas with large Hispanic populations, extended electronics sections near college campuses, enhanced home and garden departments in family neighborhoods. But the numbers only told part of the story. The real measure of success was sitting in my email inbox every morning. Thank you notes from customers, photos of birthday parties featuring decorations we'd special ordered, stories about employees who'd gone above and beyond to solve problems. We weren't just selling merchandise, we were weaving ourselves into the fabric of communities. Fresh Mart had opened as scheduled, with the fanfare and promotional pricing that corporate chains were famous for. For 3 weeks, our original location saw a noticeable dip in foot traffic as customers checked out the new competition. I'd spent those weeks holding my breath, wondering if all my confidence and strategic planning had been naive optimism. Then, something remarkable happened. Customers started coming back. Matt. Not all of them, and not immediately, but enough to matter. They came back because Mrs. Chen missed talking to Marcus about her grandson's progress in school. They came back because the specialty food items Maria had recommended weren't available at Fresh Mart. They came back because Jennifer remembered their names, and Anna always asked about their families. Menia, Beniali Hestok, Dalagehor Hezkeskavel. They came back because we'd built relationships, not just retail transactions. By November, our original store's sales had not only recovered, but exceeded pre-Fresh Mart levels. The competition had actually helped us clarify our value proposition and strengthen customer loyalty. You did something I've never seen before, Kevin Chen told me during our quarterly review meeting. Most independent retailers either get crushed by big box competition or survive by finding tiny niches. You turned the competition into a growth catalyst. It was true. The Fresh Mart challenge had forced me to think bigger, to stop seeing myself as a small business owner and start thinking like a regional entrepreneur. The investment partnership had provided capital, but more importantly, it had provided credibility and professional support that accelerated every aspect of our operations. Now I had a CFO who handled the financial complexities I'd struggled with alone, a marketing director who'd helped us build a brand identity across all 4 locations, a head of operations who'd standardized our training and customer service protocols without losing the personal touch that made us special. I was no longer just Sarah Martinez, the former Walmart employee who'd taken a big risk. I was Sarah Martinez, CEO of a growing retail chain that employed 43 people across 4 locations and was being courted by commercial real estate developers in 3 states. The transformation felt surreal sometimes. Last week, I'd been invited to speak at the Arizona Small Business Association's annual conference. The topic: Building Community-Centered Retail in the Digital Age. 200 business owners had listened as I shared the story of Martinez Family Retail, taking notes and asking questions about scaling customer relationships and competing with corporate chains. Standing at the podium, looking out at an audience that included several people who'd inspired my own journey, I'd felt a profound sense of completion. Not the end of the story, but the end of a chapter that had begun with Jessica's dismissive laughter. The speaking engagement had been covered by the Phoenix Business Journal, which led to interviews with 2 podcasts and an invitation to join the board of the Valley Entrepreneurs Network. Success was building on itself in ways I'd never anticipated, but the moment that truly marked my liberation came on a Tuesday afternoon in late February, almost exactly 2 years after that humiliating family dinner. I was reviewing site plans for our 5th location when my assistant knocked on my office door. "Sarah, your grandmother is here to see you." Elena Martinez walked into my office with the same quiet dignity she'd always carried, but there was something different in her eyes. Pride, yes, but also a kind of recognition that I'd only seen once before, the night she'd defended me at that disastrous birthday dinner. "Abuela," I said, standing to embrace her. "What brings you here?" She looked around my office, the awards on the walls, the financial charts, the architectural plans spread across my desk, and smiled. "I wanted to see what you built," she said simply, "and I wanted to tell you something." She sat in the chair across from my desk, her hands folded in her lap. "When I was your age, I had a small grocery store. Nothing fancy, Just a neighborhood place where people could buy what they needed. But it was mine. I knew the story, but I'd never heard her tell it quite this way. People used to tell me it was too risky, too hard for a woman with young children. They said I should be satisfied with what I had, that I was being greedy for wanting more. She paused, her eyes distant with memory. I listened to them for too long. But you built the store anyway. Yes, but I kept it small, safe. I never expanded because I was afraid of what people would say if I failed. She looked directly at me. You did what I was too scared to do, Misha. You bet on yourself and won. The weight of that recognition, from the woman who'd been my earliest example of female entrepreneurship, hit me harder than any business award or financial milestone. I had good teachers, I said, and you learned the right lessons. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small wrapped package. This is for you. Inside was a photograph I'd never seen before, my grandmother at maybe 25, standing in front of her grocery store with a sign that read, Martinez Market. She looked proud, determined, and a little defiant. For your office, she said, to remember that building something that matters is always worth the risk. After she left, I sat alone with the photograph, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. 2 years ago, I'd been a Walmart employee who let other people define her potential. Now I was the CEO of a growing company, a sought-after speaker, a business owner who employed dozens of people and served thousands of customers. But more than any of that, I was free. Free from the need to make myself smaller, to make others comfortable. Free from the fear that I wasn't smart enough, connected enough, or worthy enough to build something meaningful. Free from Jessica's laughter and my father's warnings, and everyone else's limited vision of what someone like me could achieve. The phone rang, interrupting my reflection. It was Rosa. Turn on channel 12, she said, excitement bubbling in her voice. You're not going to believe this. I pulled up the local news station on my computer and watched a segment about small businesses thriving in competitive markets. There was footage of our Scottsdale location, interviews with customers, and a brief clip of me discussing our expansion plans. But the part that made me laugh out loud was the graphic at the bottom of the screen. Local chain competes successfully against major retailers. Chain, they'd called us a chain. Not a small business, not a local store, but a chain. That evening, I drove past all 4 of our locations, taking the long route that let me see each storefront lit up against the desert twilight. Employees I'd hired were helping customers I'd never met find products sourced through relationships I'd built. The ripple effects of that first terrifying decision to leave Walmart had spread further than I'd ever imagined possible. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. Staff meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. to discuss the Vegas expansion proposal. Exciting times. Vegas. Desert Capital Partners had identified an opportunity to open 3 locations in Henderson and Summerlin, targeting the same underserved community demographic that had made us successful in Phoenix. If the numbers worked out, we'd be a 2-state operation by the end of the year. I thought about calling Jessica to share the news, but I realized I didn't need to. Her opinion of my success wasn't the point anymore. The point was that I'd built something valuable, something that mattered to the communities we served and the employees we supported. The point was that when someone asked me what I did for a living, I could say I'm the CEO of Martinez Family Retail, with quiet pride and absolute conviction. Working at Walmart forever? I smiled as I pulled into my driveway, thinking about the scared woman who'd sat at that family dinner 2 years ago, absorbing condescension and wondering if she'd ever amount to anything more than other people's expectations. That woman was gone. In her place was an entrepreneur, a leader, a builder of dreams, who happened to have learned her most important lessons while wearing a blue vest and name tag. Jessica had asked if I was going to work at Walmart forever, meaning it as an insult, a limitation, a way to keep me small. She'd been wrong about everything except the question itself. Costin, the question wasn't whether I'd work at Walmart forever. The question was what I'd build with everything Walmart had taught me. And the answer to that question was just getting started. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.